Call, please.
Commissioner Collins?
Here.
Commissioner Cross?
Here.
Commissioner Derzinski?
Here.
Commissioner Engel?
Here.
Commissioner Jager?
Here.
Commissioner Longmire?
Present.
Commissioner Mahoney?
Here.
Commissioner Plummer?
Here.
Commissioner Skolnick?
Here.
Commissioner Snyder?
Here.
Commissioner Wilkins?
Here. We have quorum, thank you. What is your pleasure on the minutes of July 26th?
Hope they be approved. Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please. I'm sorry. You can do it. Okay. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. The motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to number 4, informational items.
Will they be accepted, please, on file? Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Before I carry that motion, we're going to have a presentation from the Transportation Department regarding the rural bus service, and I think that I should ask them to come up and do that presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we have a PowerPoint on there, a few slides. It should be. Thank you, Commissioners. Bob Lukens, Community Development Director for the county. We have a presentation here today for you on our Phase 2 efforts and the rural bus, the proposed rural service for the county, bus service. So if we could go to the next slide, Pam. We'll start with Phase 1. In May of 2010, MATS extended the these services into the evening hours, and that was known as Phase 1. The public has been very appreciative, and the service has been very well received. Our numbers are growing on a monthly basis, and that has been what led into our Phase 2 options. Phase 2 began in 2010. It was at the same time that we were implementing many of the Phase 1 options. Now we have federal and state resources available, and local partnerships are continuing to build. We're trying to develop them to bring in more match funding for the various grants that we receive for transportation. Jim Coons here, the Transit System Manager, will outline some of the other Phase 2 initiatives that we have going, and also the rural routes, some of the options that we have there for you. So Jim.
Well, as Bob mentioned, we are continuing to work on additional phases of transit services. When Phase 1 was put into effect, we began talking about Phase 2 at that time behind the scenes. Phase 2 planning is focused on developing mobility management capacities, contracting with agencies or groups for targeted demand response services, and increasing our demand response productivity. Those are kind of the things we've been working on behind the scenes. Phase 2 is also being implemented on a piece-by-piece basis as opportunities arise. So we began providing transportation for the Sobriety Corps program back in October of 2010, and also for community corrections in 2010. We continue to work with Michigan Works and the county's Department of Employment and Training to identify ways we can help them with transportation services. When we have peak hours on the GO bus, we're putting an additional unit out there as needed to provide that peak hour capacity. Of course, the board authorized us to apply for Tiger funding back in March, or in February, for rural buses, and the board also gave us authority to develop a mobility management program, and we have hired our mobility coordinator, who was just brought on board. The Tiger grant for rural bus capital has provided an additional platform on which we can build some of these Phase 2 services.
Mr. Coons, you have a question.
Tiger is an acronym for?
Tiger is an acronym for a federal program. It stands for Transportation Investments Generating Economic Recovery. That's a program that the U.S. Department of Transportation has put into place for transportation of all modes, whether it be public transit, roads, rail, maritime, etc.
Is that a direct money to us, or does that go through the state?
This is a direct grant to the county.
Okay, so state will be taking
Correct.
administrative fee out of it.
Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, you had it. For the rural bus service component, as we discussed, these vehicles that we're bringing in, 20% of the operating costs of this service will be coming from local funds. That would include fares from the passengers, advertising on the buses, and other partnerships that we're working to develop, including possible partnerships with municipalities, townships, corporations, etc. The rural bus service itself is scalable, so we are looking at scaling the service to the available resources. The routes, the hours, the schedules, the details have not all been developed yet. Those are things that we're working through. But again, the local expense portion, the 20% portion, is also scalable. So depending on how much service, how much partnership we're able to develop with our community partners, that will help us in planning what the routing would be and what the times of day, days of the week would be. Any of these partnership meetings that are underway, we're asking for requests to support the service. We're not going in mandating that local unit of government participate. Again, into Jim. Yes.
We did a survey up north back,
2010.
okay.
We did do a survey in 2010, approximately when we were putting the evening services on the road. We were also evaluating the potential for transportation services in the White Lake area. And so we still have the results of that survey, and we're taking that into account. And there is still interest up in that area, so we're looking at all of that.
Do you recall what the potential traffic was? My recollection is it was pretty thin.
I don't recall offhand, a summary of the survey data. We're looking into that. The survey was general public survey,
Yeah,
and
right.
so some of our discussions now we're having are with businesses in the area and trying to maybe target how we can serve their employee base. If we can hit Alcoa or some of the major manufacturers there and make sure we design something that will accommodate a shift change, we may be able to work with both the employment training department and the manufacturers to help provide services.
Thank you.
From a scalability standpoint, again, these are really rough estimated costs, but if we were to run 12 hours of service on 3 buses that we're bringing into town every weekday, it may cost $507,000 for the year. The local share then would be $101,000. And we can scale that down to different service scenarios. So if we're providing 8 hours of service, then we would have to look for $70,000 in local funding. If we just ran peak hour service and went to each of these areas once or twice a day, we may be looking at local share of as little as $31,000. So all of these are variations that exist, and we are working to develop those.
Commissioner Tarasenko.
With the number of charter schools that we have, the academies, and the runs we have to Baker and MCC, I know Catholic Central runs a school bus. I do believe West Michigan Christian does. I know Catholics is an absolute loser. Are anything being done to look at maybe these runs helping with bringing their students back and forth to these schools that don't have transportation capabilities? Just throwing a thought out there.
We certainly are taking, putting into the thought process the colleges, and how we can service those with these routes. The district-based schools are a little different. The charter schools, certainly we consider that as well. 2 of the charter schools that we have transported for in the past, Waypoint Academy and Timberland Academy. Waypoint bought buses a year ago, and they've been operating their own system for a while, and I understand Timberland is looking at doing that this coming school year to some degree.
Just a thought of something maybe we cheaper.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Again, I mentioned that this is all scalable, and there's kind of a cyclical planning process in place and happening behind the scenes. And as we're discussing partnerships, then routing scenarios adjust, and then as the routing adjusts, it brings up another idea for another partnership. So really, I can't tell you that we have routing or times or schedules in place. It's all a work in progress. We'll continue to develop this over the coming months. And if local share options are slow to emerge, we can deploy just a peak hour service, we can deploy a once daily service, every other day service. We have a lot of alternatives that we can put on the road, dependent on what kind of service plan we can develop. So this is something that is underway, and it will be shared with you when we have something that we believe we can show.
I take it then that this grant don't have a specific amount of time you have to use it, or amount of time you have to run these buses or anything?
It doesn't really. The grant is for the capital equipment. In putting in the grant application, we did make some assumptions and presumptions that we would operate X number of hours of service. But again, the grant is for the capital equipment, so the operation piece is a local decision by and large.
But certainly they don't want them to get sat here and not get used.
No, and again, we will do everything we can to put them in service, more than just the minimal amount.
Are they a different vehicle than what we already employ?
The proposal is that they would be the heavy duty, just as we've been purchasing, the heavy duty compressed natural gas. And then again, just in terms of some possible sources of local revenues, potential alternatives include passenger fares. Obviously, we will need to identify the fare structure for new routes. If they're going into different areas, do we do something different with the fare structure? Are there adjustments to current services that we need to make if feasible? Of course, we're looking very strongly at business partner underwriting or advertising agreements. If we have a business that's willing to do something out of goodwill in their community, we certainly are eager to see that. If they would like in exchange to have all of the goodwill published on the side of the bus, we can work on getting their names out there on the buses as well in exchange for some assistance. Of course, we have a review of our existing local funding formula, wherein we bring match from local communities. That has not changed in close to 20 years and needs to be discussed. We're looking at contracts with other state or local agencies, whether that be the Department of Employment and Training, Department of Human Services, all those others. How can we develop some contracts with them? And then we will also be looking for ways to increase program revenues from our Greyhound ticketing function, our advertising sales, Muskegon Trolley Company revenues, anything else that we can go after. I think that's the last slide there. That is our status at this point. Again, I wish I could tell you I had the routing completed and all of the details, but it is a lengthy process to develop a new service and identify something that we think is going to generate ridership.
Commissioner Jacob?
All right, let's say we accept the grant, and one of the routes worked, let's say like up in Whitehall, but maybe two didn't work, the one going through Holden or Urbana. And the business in that, after a year, wasn't gonna give any money anymore. Is there a consequence to this grant for that?
But I guess I would speak to the options we would have. Options we would have then would be we could redeploy the buses in service primarily in Whitehall corridor, put additional service where it is succeeding. If it came to a point where we were not using this equipment to support rural transit services, then we would likely need to work with the Federal Transit Administration to return the equipment or bring it to a different transit system.
There's no stipulation that we'd end up buying these buses, so if it didn't work, or it'd be more like we return them instead of
Yeah, I don't
buying them.
I don't believe they would require us to reimburse them and keep the vehicles. We would work with them.
I guess I'd like to see that.
Commissioner Darasinski?
Are we talking, and I know it's very early thinking, Mr. Chair, in the planning, are we talking 2, 3 vehicles, or our facility can easily handle those?
Yeah, the capital grant is for 3 buses.
Okay.
And so the planning at this point is targeting putting 3 buses on the road. Now, it may not be, you know, it may be 2 up to the north and 1 that's going east. You know, there's a lot of development to be done there yet. But it's 3 vehicles.
And our facility is more than adequate to,
We're getting crowded, but we will fit them in.
okay, I know in 1980, Mats did a cooperative agreement with Ravenna and Eggleston. It was very short-lived, and I don't know if it was a grant structure or the communities were supporting it, I recall. I was on the board back then. I don't know if we went north or any other direction, but it was 1980. I was clerk out there and really pushed it. Didn't last but 6 months. Just lessons learned. I'm a big advocate of this. Of course, for years, Eggleston had the Wolf Lake Transit Authority that brought people into town. Very successful business. I'm excited about it.
Are there any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Coon. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and the motion is carried. We'll move on to public comment on an agenda item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on to a public hearing on the Tiger funds.
We had a report.
That
But
was the
it wasn't a public hearing.
Right.
Are we in a public hearing? Is that
Aye.
what-
Ma'am.
This is the public hearing. That was the presentation from
I move that we open the public hearing.
Support that.
okay.
Excuse me, Commissioners, if I could speak, we did receive no comments, written comments about the Tiger grant, so I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you. And the record will reflect that. Okay, so we'll disregard that. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard on this, on these funds?
I move we close the public hearing.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
All opposed? Then the motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on to items for consideration, TR 120839.
So second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
I did have a quick question, and that is, it mentions that this wasn't part of the Honeywell project because of a federal procurement process. Did that mean that you were supposed to bid that particular thing out?
Yeah, again, the federal procurement process will require certain types of bidding procedures, and the Honeywell project did not go through that. So we, this was discussed in the Honeywell project, but we didn't do it.
Okay, thank you, that's what I thought.
Are there any other comments or questions? All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. The motion is carried. Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to discuss old business?
Yeah, I don't know if this comes under old business, but I guess it's probably for Jim Coons. You know, I saw, I'm aware of the fact that Pioneer Resources has, looks like an enormous number of buses. I don't know if they've got 100 buses over there. What do they do with those buses? And I see they just got some more. I got a grant for another 3, 4, 5, 6 buses. I don't know.
And Pioneer Resources, I can't speak to all the details of their business, but they do a lot of transportation under contract to agencies. And they operate both in Muskegon and Ottawa counties. So in Muskegon County, I know they're doing a lot of transport for community mental health, as well as other types of agencies under contract. In Ottawa County, they have different types of services. I believe they're involved in the workforce development programs down there, et cetera. So, and they do have a very large I could arrange to have somebody provide more information.
No, I just, if you drive by their facility, I can't remember what street that's.
They're on Sheridan.
On Sheridan, I mean, that thing is jam-packed full of buses, I don't think they've got room for all
I'm
those.
sorry, they also do, I believe they do some of the Head Start transportation, so they have a lot of different programs.
Thank you.
Any other comments? We'll move on to number 10, public comment on a new topic. Is there anyone who wishes to introduce something new?
Move we adjourn. Second.
All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, the motion is carried. Thank you. Mr. Stolman?
It's a nonprofit. We need to do food service, they do a lot of housing,